Hello and welcome to As the CMMC Churns. I'm Matt Titcomb, the CEO of Peak InfoSec and a CMMC certified assessor. Peak InfoSec is also an authorized third-party assessment organization or C3PAO. Today's episode of As the CMMC Churns is Your System Security Plan Sucks. Seriously. So as a part of this, as we get into assessments, we're starting to do a lot more reviews of organization system security plans that we're not involved in the drafting of. And we're finding a lot of badness. One of the primary things, and it's related to SSP rule number 1, do not use the SSP template provided by NIST. It officially sucks. Sorry, Ron and Vicky. Yeah, it officially sucks. It's a great starting point, but it doesn't even meet the assessment objectives underneath 3.12.4, let alone lead you to writing an effective system security plan as described by the System Security Plan Guide, which is another NIST special publication. So just don't use it. It's like drugs and their template. Just don't do it. Now, there's a lot out there that do work. Tools, GRC tools like FutureFeed, templates we provide, other templates, they all help you to do this, but garbage in, garbage out. And sometimes with the wrong template, garbage gets stinkier. So, again, don't use their template. We are going to reference our two templates that we use for Peak InfoSec with our clients on a consulting basis. They're available free of charge, unsupported, and you're on your own. Good luck with those if you choose to take them off of our website. Now, we do have two versions, one with a traceability matrix that's an external document, one where each requirement kind of shows its relationship to the supporting artifacts and evidentiary objects as identified in NIST 800-171 Alpha. Now, we'll be following the latter without the DTM traceability matrix just because of presentation on PowerPoint for everyone. So, now, first and foremost, draft SSPs don't count. You'll find this in the second page of our SSP. This is your record of acceptance and approval by the system owner and system security officer. This does need to be signed and approved and tracked in your revision history table. Draft documentation does not count. Anything that is dependent upon a draft system security plan does not count. Therefore, a whole lot of not mets. So again, drafts do not count. Did y'all get that? Now, in our SSP, the general main body, we've got the purpose area. Tell us generally what this is. And as we get into these first couple sections, this is really setting the stage. This is not meant for in the detail weeds yet about your SSP. That comes later on in section 6. Scope 2, what is the scope of this? Is this an enterprise or enclave system security plan? Is this SSP dependent upon another SSP, i.e. from your corporate parents who provide Office 365? And if so, what is its relationship? Is this SSP for FCI or CUI or just CUI only? Let us know. We do need to know that. And as you're painting that broad context in these first couple paragraphs, you're giving us that background that helps us as we dig into the rest of the SSP. Now, you do want to cite all the related laws, regulations, and policies, both internal and external, that affect this SSP. Why? This is how you can reuse this SSP for multiple other compliance frameworks that you may be referencing in this. Again, build once, use many is kind of our motto. Now, you do also want to have a roles and responsibilities chart. This can be done with a RACI chart or even just a simple table and list of things. A lot of different ways to do this, but this is more for your internal benefit, nothing specific for us right now. Under Rev 3, yeah, this may become a little bit more important. System 5, you're now giving us some general information in Section 5. Now, really, Section 5.5, you should be providing the general system description, and it really sets that next tier now of the more context and background. The types of systems, the types of components, whether you're hybrid or on-premise only or cloud virtual only. Kind of give us that broader next brush of the details before we start diving into the weeds in section 6. Likewise, 5.6 should identify all types of CUI and FCI it is designed to protect. Again, you can have multiple categories of CUI, but by default, all CUI that we're talking about is going to be moderate. And if you add an export control and potentially some other types, you've now gone to high. So be aware of that. Now, section 6 is the main body of the core part of the front part of our documents. Now, this is used to explain CUI in your environment. Realistically, this is all about the data flow diagrams. Remember, 801.71 is information-centric, not system-centric. So as a part of that, explain how the people and the processes and then the technologies and facilities support data, the flow of CUI within your environment. Let us know where all the CUI repositories are, logical and physical, as you work through your environment. Likewise, provide a scoping diagram. We'll give a brief illustration. There's another As the CMMC Churns on how to draft one. But it gives us an illustration that becomes a quick reference to assessors to make our lives easier. Lastly, using text, describe those components and roles that they provide in your environment. Again, you're helping us to understand what your environment is and how it operates at a more textual, detailed level. Now, when it comes to CRMAs, you are responsible for explaining to us why it is a CRMA and why you didn't treat it as a normal CUI asset. Likewise, the same for specialized assets and why you didn't treat it as a normal CUI or security protection asset. Now, you do need to list all out-of-scope components and explain why. We do need to understand that, and please list them all. We don't want to find out about stuff and have to understand and debate it and discuss it during the assessment. That's not the time for that. So here's a sample scope diagram that we use for Peak InfoSec. It kind of gives you the people, the facilities, and the technologies that are all used, broken out by the asset categories, and then sticking within the NIST definition of components. And so this is how we illustrate this. This will work in the context if you have to have your system security plan used by other federal agencies that don't reference CUI assets and other CMMC asset categories. Now back to the main body, your network diagrams. Please provide network diagrams for all locations and networks, and yes, even in the cloud. Sometimes for complicated environments, it's good to provide both a physical topology and then the logical topologies. Now, speaking of which, network diagrams that are left alone and just drawn out and handed to us are garbage and useless, just to be honest. You do need to explain your diagrams. You do not want to let us interpret them. That is to your disadvantage. Again, going back to toddlers and assessors, you're letting us wander amok and make interpretations. Don't. Also, in the text-based descriptions, highlight where logical isolation occurs in the network. This is, again, to your advantage. The more you tell us, the more often you tell us, the more likely we are going to be we will remember it. Likewise, if you have a DMZ, call it out. Now, back to the main body. We hit networking diagrams. Document your network segmentation in a zone-to-zone communication matrix. This may get really big and complicated, and it may fit better in another call. Hey, it is live. So, document your zone-to-zone communication matrix, and if it gets really big and complicated, we have a section in the appendices you can use that. Document how CUI is protected in transit for remote users and, if applicable, between physical locations. Now, remote users, don't forget, technically, when you are going to your cloud service like Office 365, you are considered a remote user because you're traversing an unauthorized, unmanaged external network. So yes, even document cloud services in this area. Describe your interconnections and to other external organizations, your partners. If you've got B2B trust set up, your managed service providers, cloud services, everything. Explain your interconnections at this point in time in your document. Likewise, provide a pointer to all your hardware and software inventories. Don't put it in your SSP. It's too dynamic, too changing, too much of a pain to maintain. Just point a pointer to it. That's why in the evidence list it says list. Put it elsewhere. Likewise, identify all ODPs, especially if externally identified, i.e. DoD's definition of periodically per DoD instruction 5200.48 glossary and what is now in the draft CMMC rule. You do want to have this defined and documented per your advantage here because it does guide us in exactly why your environment is set up. This is going to become even more important underneath 801.71 Rev 3, where you're likely to inherit a lot of ODPs from the federal government. Likewise, in the very last section, specify your overall conformity as of your last review. And if you do have anything that is non-applicable, i.e. you don't provide wireless, so therefore all the wireless requirements would be NA, please document and explain. So here you will again explain in the requirements, but again, tell us multiple times. It really does help. And if you do have assessment objectives that are also non-applicable, i.e. software development ones, because you only use COTS, just explain why here again. And the last section is list the organization roles accountable and responsible for each requirement. This really does help us to know when we're talking to somebody and help us to get a mind around who is the primary lead for doing different things within your organization. Now, the appendices, the second and most important part of the appendices is your revision history. You are required to be reviewing your SSP on at least annual basis. This should be documented and tracked in your history. The most important section really does come down to your conformity underneath Appendix B. Explain all of this at the assessment objective level. Seriously. If you do have a POAM, list all of your open and closed POAMs here. You don't need to provide us the details, just the status and when it's expected or when it closed out. You can even add enhancements. It works to your advantage to go ahead and add enhancements and upgrades and changes to your environment that you're planning because it gives us a sight picture that you're actually really using POAMs like you should be. We add in NFOs as an optional area. We do so because underneath Revision 2, they're required to be implemented but not evaluated. So provide us a brief summary if you want. You don't have to do this. It's optional. Likewise, the optional interconnection matrix is expanded appendix. We like putting it here. It's easier to change an appendix than without having to reformat your entire document. So we do recommend using the appendices. Likewise, we do add in an optional section about explaining how you met the DFAR 7012 requirements. Again, redundant, but if you're handing this off to DIBCAC, it really makes their life easier and they appreciate it. And lastly, this is another table to link NIST and other security frameworks as a mapping table to your other compliance requirements. Again, build once, use many type approach that we follow within Peak InfoSec. Now, we're going to jump into a sample write-up using 319, your notice of consent banner requirements. This is a screenshot from our template, so you can see we work things at the assessment objective level, on documenting it and requiring conformity statements, and then the related supporting artifacts. And we'll talk about all of this in a step-by-step manner. Now, paragraph A, so generally assessment objective A, or the first one in the pairs, is always tell me what it should be. The way we've done this, there's a couple options. You can document what it should be within the assessment objective. This is one way to do it. We actually tend to use a pointer type methodology so things remain more flexible and we don't have to maintain the SSP as things revise with as many revisions as you have to. So again, this makes it easier Both are fine. Both are acceptable. We are just looking to know what it is, where it is, and its approval status. Now, when it comes to how you set up your environment, that's going to show up, for example, in this one in Bravo. We use Microsoft Intune to set device configurations for our Mac OS Windows devices, and then Azure AD is set up using company branding. Now, Cisco Duo on Commercial and Umbrella neither support the ability to set up an SSP, the Notice and Consent banner. Just let us know that, especially since this is not something specific to protecting CUI. We're a little bit nicer on those when those pop up. Now, when it comes down to it, now you've told us what it should be, you've told us how you've done it, now provide the supporting artifacts. The first one that you're going to find as you look through all the evidentiary objects that NIST lists out are really the most common thing is system design documentation. In this case, it's our access control policy and then the ODP for notice of consent. Access control policy for us just simply says the CISO shall establish a standard and work with the IT team to implement it. Cool. And then likewise, this is the approved banner that was approved by me as the CISO. So we're all off and going good. So that's the way it should be. The last part are your supplemental artifacts. These are how it's actually implemented in a test mode, so lists, screenshots of the actual environment. So in the case of Notice and Consent Banner, when you're logging into Azure Office 365, this is the way it's going to look, and that's the expected view. So that's a supplemental artifact as a screenshot of the implementation. Now, let's sum up. Use a well-written SSP to guide and tell your assessors the story of how you meet the intent of the requirement. Seriously, take time to do that. Write your SSP at the assessment objective level. When organizations aren't, i.e. they've used the NIST template, they are failing to meet requirements at the AO level, which means they fail the overall security requirement, which means they get a not met. So really, seriously, write things up at the assessment objective level. Use your supporting evidence category types and tell us the complete story of how you've met the intent of implementing 800.171 in your environment. I'm Matt Titcomb, and again, thank you for joining us for As the CMMC Churns.